Where you kids going today?
To Beale.
What are we going to see?
Jets and airplanes.
Yes. Here at Beale Open House today, the first time in what, 7 years, these are the 4 aircraft that are based at Beale. The U-2 spy plane, the venerable U-2, the Global Hawk unmanned aircraft, the T-38 trainer jet, specifically for the U-2 pilots and the KC-135 pilots, and the KC-135 Reserve Squadron refueling squadron. So let's go take a closer look at some of the unique missions that these aircraft at Beale perform for the United States Air Force and United States Air Force Reserve. My name's Juan Brown, you're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. We're kind of at a crossword puzzle? No. We're kind of at the crossroads for reconnaissance aircraft now. And here at Beale Air Force Base is exactly where those two roads meet. There's the U-2 manned aircraft, been around for years and years. And of course the Global Hawk unmanned aircraft. Why is it that the U-2 is still around? Well, there's certain sensor packages that the U-2 carries that the Global Hawk apparently is not equipped to deal with at this time. So there's a lot of sensor missions that the U-2 can exclusively do that the Global Hawk cannot do. One of the big advantages that the U-2 has over the Global Hawk is its payload carrying capacity. It can simply carry a greater payload to a higher, safer altitude than the Global Hawk. Now the Global Hawk has the advantage being unmanned of loitering for up to 24 hours where you got the human limitation here in the U-2. But the U-2 can carry more, carry it higher, and thus the U-2 is, or the Air Force has decided that the U-2 is here to stay for now. Until they develop an unmanned aircraft that's as big and powerful as the U-2, it's here to stay. Up in the nose there is where you would typically run your camera equipment if you're running camera type operations, and these big pods on the wing carry your signal intelligence. Another thing the U-2 has the advantage of is better all-weather capability. Even though there's no de-icing capability on these wings, the wings are efficient enough and the aircraft efficient enough where they can easily climb through the weather and get above the weather on top and continue the mission. Thunderstorms and that sort of thing can greatly affect the Global Hawk. This is for missile detection. The missiles can come up and reach the U-2 at altitude, and this is where you find out whether they're coming after you or not. They have a little more defensive capability than just their altitude. None of the payload in the U-2 is here in the fuselage. This is all occupied with engine, basically, and your fuel is in the wings. It's just a couple of small header tanks in the fuselage. And as we talked about before, how they have to balance the fuel as they come into land. Here's a closer look at the U-2. Not quite getting us up into the cockpit area, but you can see it's a pretty small office, single-seater. And the long, high aspect ratio glider type wings.
Mr. John Huggins, our world-famous air show announcer, and our air boss, Mr. Ralph Royce. Thank you, sir.
Some of you were asking about the pogos. Once the U-2 lands, it's got these titanium skids here on the bottom where they can drag the wingtip, and then crew members will come and put these pogos, install them in the wings, and right the plane. Because it's got this bicycle-style landing gear right here. And it's the Air Force's only tail dragger in the inventory, and there's the tail wheel. You can see it's a real low angle of attack sitting on the ground.
All right, folks, we're kicking things off. Hold on, because we got a couple surprises for you on the show today.
Even got a rear view mirror.
Well, let's see what we got coming up here. We're flying the 38 They use him to run the T-38 shop. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Sharp.
The wrinkles in the wings.
The number 2 jet.
Of course, these wings bend up tremendously once they start creating lift.
Major Art Bull, call sign Mega, as well as the commander of the
Here's some of the additional spoilers here in the back of the aircraft, right by the tail wheel. Here's the hydraulic actuator for the rear spoiler.
And finally, the number 4 aircraft,
And the solid tail wheel. Single engine jet with the 2 inlets left and right. The 4 Maltese crosses are the tail flash of Beale Air Force Base, BB. Room for your golf clubs in there. And of course, these pogos are in place when the U-2 takes off, and they just drop once the wings create enough lift, bend up, and the pogos fall. Keeps the wings level for the departure, and of course, it doesn't take much runway to blast off in one of these.
Wait, I'm going to say it's about 500 to 600 feet. Here he goes. U-2 Dragonlady on the roll. And he's airborne.
Going for some smash. Yeah! 17,000 pounds of thrust. When these two reconnaissance aircraft are working out in the field, orbiting high over the combat situation, they're gathering data and transmitting it back down to the ground with a room full of 150 people that are absorbing that information, making sense of it, translating what they're hearing and seeing. And some of that information is reported back up to the pilot in the case of the U-2. And of course the Global Hawk is completely unmanned. Here's an aircraft that's very near and dear to my heart. I got maybe 100 hours, 150 hours in the T-38 trainer, the advanced trainer that the Air Force uses for those pilots that are going to be fighter bomber qualified. Supersonic trainer built by Northrop. Let me show you around.
1,187 of these jets built.
These T-38s are painted black, are based here at Beale, and are for the U-2 pilots to gather proficiency flying, as well as the air tanker, the KC-135 pilots. The tanker pilots, not air tankers. What I want to show you is the thin airfoil shape of the T-38. The T-38 was designed to train guys to fly the Century Series jets, the supersonic fighter jets of the 50s and 60s, basically. So this jet, it replicates, it has a very high landing speed. Thus the thin airfoil for supersonic flight. You can have landing speeds in this thing with a no-flap landing as high as 180 miles an hour. The key to supersonic flight, as Chuck Yeager and the folks of the Bell X-1 program discovered, was this full fly-in stabilator. That was the key to maintaining pitch control of the aircraft as it breaks through the sound barrier. Twin jet engine.
The T-38 like the one you see before you today.
All the fuel in the T-38 is stored here in the fuselage. It only has about an hour, hour and a half's worth of fuel on board. If you want to go cross country, you got to shoot up to altitude and skyhook it into your destination. Twin seat, tandem configuration with ejection seats. Instructor in the back, student in the front. Very demanding aircraft to learn to fly. 1 degree of pitch change while you're instrument training is a 900 feet per minute rate of climb or descent. As a student at the Air Force pilot training, by the time you graduate from the T-38, you have become proficient at formation flying to a level of 4-ship formation lead. Using the same formation separation as the Thunderbirds. The T-38 Talon, one of my favorites. In a conventional airplane, bug smasher like the mighty Luscombe, with its fat airfoil, it has a very sharp stall curve to it. The aircraft will fly, fly, fly until it reaches its stalling point, the wing stalling point, and then abruptly brake and stall. The thin airfoil on these high-performance fighter-type aircraft are constantly in a stall buffet situation when you are flying around the pattern. So to assist with these high-performance aircraft, they are all equipped with angle of attack gauges to just help you find out how far you can push this thing before you've gone too far. Another aircraft based here at Beale that you often see over town in pairs is this KC-135. KC-135R model. You can tell it's an R model by the big CFM56 engines. Back when Beale had the SR-71 mission, they needed these tankers because the SR-71 leaked so much fuel on the ground, upwards of, 6,000 gallons an hour, that as soon as the SR-71 took off, it needed to hit a tanker right away after takeoff and fill up. And then as the SR-71 continued on high-speed flight, the aircraft would heat up and expand, and all those leaky fuel tanks would leak. Why did the fuel tanks leak on the SR-71? Because there was no material that was created at the time that could seal up the fuel tanks of the SR-71. So they're basically metal fuel tanks that would expand and contract and leak when they were on the ground, but would seal up when in the air and heat it up. So 2 of these tankers were required for each SR-71 launch. And of course, every, I don't know, I guess an hour or so, the SR-71 would need to refuel. So that was the primary mission of the KC-135 here at Beale for years. The SR-71's gone now. These R models have replaced the models of tanker that they had during the SR-71 days, because in the SR-71 days, those tankers had split fuel systems. They could carry the fuel that was unique to the SR-71, as well as normal JP4 used for the rest of the Air Force inventory. This Q model has just one single fuel system, common to most all U.S. Air Force aircraft. And they service just about any aircraft that needs fuel, needs air refueling out here on the West Coast. This, of course, is the fuel boom, and this is how you receive your fuel. And if you haven't done air refueling before in a heavy aircraft like the Lockheed 141, you haven't lived yet. It is a real chore to receive fuel from a KC-135. This boom fits right over the top of your head into the receiver, at least in the 141, and required about 20 minutes to fill up the tanks in a 141, and you had to hand fly that thing, keeping it perfectly in the box here, a very limited narrow window of left and right, up and down azimuth, to stay hooked up to the tanker. And of course the boom operator is sitting up there watching your refueling operation, and if at any time you reach the limits of this boom, he will disconnect and retract the boom and get it out of harm's way. These wings here help fly that boom into position and out of the way. But it's up to you as the receiver aircraft to get in proper position. KC-135, R model, Beale Air Force Base. Here's the little window where the boom operator works out of, observing the refueling operation. Back around, I don't know, in the 80s, 1980s, ROTC, we got to ride in the KC-135s and actually watch the SR-71s being refueled. That was an amazing experience. This is an earlier model, the CFM56 engine, similar to what the 737s are flying and are having troubles with. These earlier models, as you can see, have a lot more fan blades, and the Air Force got the budget to fully inspect these engines as required all the time. Besides air refueling, the KC-135 can also handle quite a bit of cargo, palletized cargo on rollers, with raise it up with a K-loader into that door right there, slide it down into the aircraft. Usually run by reservists. Air Force Reserve, KC-135 at Beale. This is the boom position on the KC-10 out of Travis Air Force Base. And as a receiver, you always breathed a sigh of relief when you found out that your tankers were the KC-10s as opposed to the KC-135s. Why? Because the KC-10, much bigger aircraft, much wider boom envelope, much wider box to work with for your refueling operation. Much easier to receive fuel from a KC-130, from a KC-10 than a KC-135. This is the C-17 McDonnell Douglas aircraft that replaced the aging C-141, Lockheed, my old airplane. This one is from March Reserve Unit, and C-17s are also based at Travis Air Force Base. Strategic airlift and tactical airlift capability. Very short takeoff and landing capability for a big old 4-engine transport airplane. The C-17. This is NASA's F-18 research vehicle. They'll do all kinds of things, chase aircraft, that sort of thing, but they'll also put, for an example, altimeters and radar altimeters for spacecraft in the nose of this aircraft and test it here on Earth before sending it into space in the F-18. Now this is an aircraft that always gets a lot of attention. NASA's Super Guppy, the only one left flying in the world today of 4 of them that were built. These were originally KC-97 Boeing Stratocruiser aircraft, and then of course modified to hauling, and to this day they still haul outsized cargo that simply won't fit anywhere else. How do they get the cargo inside the Super Guppy? The fuselage opens right here. An outrigger comes out, the nose gear pivots, and the whole nose of the airplane opens up 90 degrees, and then you can load your outsized cargo inside of the Super Guppy. Of course, the KC-97 originally had radial engines. I think they were 4360 radial engines, and today they've been re-engined with the T-56 turboprops from a P-3 Orion aircraft. The Super Guppy. What a bizarre and amazing machine. Super. Look at that. See? It really is. Based in El Paso, Texas. There's the giant hinge point right there. And the old KC-97 fat airfoil wings. Well, that's it. That's a wrap for Beale Air Force Base Air Expo 2018. It's been 7 years since they've been able to put this thing on. What a great show, great turnout. Thanks to all the Blanco Lirio fans that came out and said hi today. See you here.